Okay, welcome to a random Thursday night live stream that I had no idea I was going to be doing until about 10 minutes ago. I just thought, man, I got about 30 minutes to spare without having to do anything for a few minutes. Um, all of my monsters are in bed asleep, and so, logic time, right? Makes the most sense to me. So, what I want to talk about for a little bit is just the iPad. I mean, the iPad, I've been reminded this week of just how cool it is. And I think that it's worth looking at the Logic Remote app for a few minutes because, it may have been a while since you've looked at it or thought about using it. Certainly, there's some limitations with it that I think I would use it more if it could do a few things for me. And we'll talk about those things in a few minutes. But let's start just by looking at this app. And of course, um, it's right here above my hand, and I've got that screen sharing. So this is a live feed from my iPad, and we'll talk about this app. So, going through it a little bit, just so you can see some of the things. There's this arrow in the top left-hand corner, and it lets us choose our different views. And it's in the mixer view right now, which is actually, I use it sometimes in there, but not as much probably as I could. Partially because I find I'm still doing a lot of the automation and things with my mouse and keyboard rather than in a mixer format. That's just me. But it does have some cool stuff. So let's start here. We have our volume and these buttons along the right side along the master fader. Those change the view. So we have volume, we have pan and volume, sends 1 through 4, audio effects 1 through 9, input, output, and MIDI effects. And let me just load one of these MIDI effects up here for a second, just so that we can talk about this a little bit. So I just loaded up MIDI effects, and I want to just do this from the iPad for a second. So of course we can click on the arpeggiator name here, and let's open the plugin. And here is by far the thing that we've been dealing with the longest with this app, and one of the main reasons why I'm still not fully integrating this device into my workflow, and that is instead of having useful visual interfaces, it just pulls up all these columns of information. So for instance, I can do transpose for the latch mode, or I can turn latch on and off. You can do a lot of stuff with this, except set the actual grid of what we have with this particular MIDI effect. So like I'm in grid mode, I want to be able to draw stuff out there, and there's just nothing here for that. So this is part of the balancing of using this thing. It's cool, but there's some issues for sure. So we get back out of that thing. So this is useful if we're doing like some mixing levels. If we want to solo, if we want to transport, if we want to set, send levels, or even I think we can actually create sends in here, put those up and down. And, now that we have the send 1 bus going to bus 1, there's aux 1. So now I can come into aux 1 and choose a plugin for that. Say I want to make this like a reverb or something. Let's do chroma verb. And there we have it. So then I can come into chroma verb and actually change some of the settings. But again, actually this one is probably better than some of the other ones because we don't need the graphic interface for this. But surely there would be times that we could even use that here. Okay, trying not to sneeze. So that part is cool. And there's a lot of useful stuff there. Clicking on the arrow again, let's look at a couple of the other things that we have. We have the step sequencer, and this by far is one of the best features of this, how we can come through and create patterns using this and do all of our editing of things. And we can come through and say, I want to do my note repeat and drag and pull that up and down. I mean, this is cool. So the step sequencer is by far one of the highlights of having the iPad app connected. Live loops I'm not going to talk about because I have a strict no live loops policy on my channel. I don't talk about live loops ever, except to say that I'm not going to talk about them. Long story. We have chord strips, which are cool. Those are, this is a cool way to perform. And then we have the smart controls and keyboard. So, depending on what type of instrument this is, we'll have a different interface here. And I can turn off the arpeggiator from the iPad. And we can do, different scales. So if I just want to stick with like a major blues. It's a nice way to be able to lock yourself into a key signature. So this is pretty useful, plus the smart controls, so I can do some basic. Cool. And I just released a video on the channel earlier today talking about MPE mode. And so, of course, without getting too much, if you want to learn more about the MPE, go check out the channel. But you can do some really cool stuff with the MPE mode with this. It's pretty awesome. Okay, so what else is here? We have key commands, which if you want to just have a bunch of key commands out here, awesome. Including, making your own. This is all of the key commands. So you can actually go through and customize a few pages with things that you want. That can be pretty useful. And then Smart Help is surprisingly ingenious. So for instance, I'm just going to hover above the retro synth here, and you'll see that the iPad is going to show everything about that, whatever I'm hovering above. So let's go into the arpeggiator, and it just flips into the manual for anything that's attached to that. I mean, if you're learning Logic for the first time, how useful is it to be able to just hover above something and have a full page that you can scroll through manual to learn more about the application? That's pretty cool. I mean, get to the point where you don't need it, but it's pretty cool. So also, I forgot one other thing here. You can perform using, we can do keyboard, or we can do the fretboard. Doesn't make a lot of sense with synthesizer, but that's cool. And then of course drum pads. And if we are using an actual drummer instead of like a synthesizer, let's load up the drum kit designer for a second. Then I don't know if we actually have the drummer or not. We have a guitar. Looks like we just still have the pads. There's got to be let's see, drum pads. I feel like I've seen that we had an actual drum kit in here at one point, but I don't know why it's not loading up right this second. So for better or worse, we have the drum pads and so forth. So different interfaces, different controls, depending on what we've got loaded up. It's all pretty cool. Okay, what else do we have here then that becomes really useful? I think that's the majority of this. Obviously, we can load up all of our different presets, and there's various things here that become really useful. I want to try loading up the Alchemy for a second. Okay, so with Alchemy, we do have the transform pad, which is super useful. Let's go back to perform using automatic. And of course, this particular instrument is compatible with MPE. So let's turn that on real quick. And we'll switch this over into pitch mode. And we're going to change the mono pitch range to 48, which is typically the default, but not in that one. It's loaded up as 2. Some really cool sounds with the MPE stuff. So check out the video I did earlier about the MPE. But so a lot of really cool things with this. I mean, there's certainly room for expanding some stuff. I think I wish we had more of the effects graphic interfaces, and I wish that we could actually like edit audio and things, like actually have the regions here. We could trim them or do some MIDI editing, which we cannot do at this moment, outside of like the actual step editor. And so it's a little bit limited in some ways, but there's just a few things that we can't do very easily in other ways. And those are the things that I've been starting to really use this for. So for instance, the MPE is one of those things. I know the other thing I was thinking of that's a huge limitation. Let's talk about that for 1 second and get that out of the way. Panning and volume, right? So I've got my panner knobs, pan knobs. And if I go to a track, and this is a huge missed opportunity for the moment, although I'm assuming they're working on it. I can't imagine they're not. Let's go to surround sound. The pan knob just disappears. There's no surround capabilities in this thing. But I mean, think about with spatial audio or doing anything with surround sound, how much a touch interface would actually mean in terms of controlling those things. So instead of just always saying, oh, you're going into surround or spatial audio, we're just going to back out of this game. How nice it would be if they actually just built a really nice interface on here for it. And so that would be cool. Instead, of course, we have our effects. So our master, like DJ effects. I mean, that's cool, but they can do this, but they can't give us like graphic interfaces for our plugins or spatial and surround sound. So some certain limitations, although I'm going to say that the effects options here are amazing. They're super incredible. There's no question. One of the videos I'm working on this week is a comparison of GarageBand and Logic, because I think that there's a legitimate thing to think about in terms of those two applications. And the similarities and the differences, and talking about the power, because what we've seen over the past 5 or 10 years, ever since GarageBand was released for the iPhone and iPad, is that most of the coolest new features come to the mobile version GarageBand before it goes to the full version of GarageBand or Logic. And so there's been a lot of like testing out of features in the mobile arena and then bringing them to Logic in the long run. Examples would be this effects right here that I just pulled up. If you don't know what those are, but you can play like an instrument. There's all kinds of repeaters and filters, stutter effects, low res effects. And you can assign new ones, and you can assign to move your iPad, and it will do that as you move it around. So I'm moving my iPad up and down, and it's moving those little things. So really cool things with that, right? That came to mobile before it came to Logic, and Step Sequencer came to mobile before, and trying to think of if there was anything else. I'm sure there are some other things, but the ease of use certainly was there before. I am curious. Let's go back to this mode for a second. Yeah, so there's some things that even with like Alchemy on GarageBand for iOS that you can do. You can use the face tool, which tracks if you're smiling or not, and it will allow you to modulate your music using your facial expressions. Can't do that with Logic easily. And so there's definitely a few things here that are really started in the mobile format and are working their way into what Logic can do. And I can't tell you how many times I hear people complaining about that, because certainly there's some fear that Logic is going to be just turned into a mobile app. And I mean, I hate to break it to you, but that's still really likely in some ways. And what we should all be doing is watching out for, we should be watching out for what happens in April, because something is happening in April that is going to show us probably the road forward for what Logic is going to do. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, at one of the last big announcements, they were talking about the new iPad Air and how it has the M1 processor, which is the same M1 that Mac Minis, have. And a lot of the laptops, the base model of the M1. And so it's pretty powerful. And they just said, wait for April, because we're going to be releasing a new version of iMovie for the iPad Air or the M1. I guess all mobile devices probably will be able to use some parts of it. But we're going to see exactly what they release with it, because if it's looking like it's edging in on what Final Cut can do, and if it has a lot of those features, then what we should expect is something similar, because what happened with Logic is what happened previously with Final Cut. When Final Cut got its huge makeover a number of years ago, they lost a lot of the professional audience, but they built it up, and it's an amazing piece of software that they essentially just said, we're willing to lose some people using this, because the plans we have are going to make this incredible in the long run. And it's incredible. It can do things that a lot of other programs still dream about doing. It still isn't the default for professionals, but it's the default for a lot of people who do media content creation. And so the question becomes, are they going to do something similar with Logic and, GarageBand take a step forward, and then all of a sudden, if it can do everything that Logic can do on the computer, if GarageBand can do all of that, then one day we're going to wake up and they're going to say, here is Logic 11 / GarageBand Pro. And, if they bring spatial audio to GarageBand on the mobile iPad, then you should all just be aware that the writing is on the wall. Now, they're not saying that that's going to be the case, because the new Mac Studio computer, which was just recently released, was aimed at people using Logic and Final Cut, and I think that they're still working in that direction. But that doesn't mean they can't simplify Logic and start getting it ready for a more mobile experience. So it's a toss-up. So back to the original issue, which is about the iPad. Is this a device worth having? Is it something that is part of our workflow? I think this one app all by itself, if you're a huge Logic user and you're doing stuff all the time, then there's a place for it. There's a place because unless you have like a bigger control surface in front of you, and that could be even something you pair with it. But this is such a cool device, because if you want, for instance, to be out in the studio with the musicians who are performing and recording, you can walk out there and just start recording using the transport on the iPad as you're walking out in the live room. And you could say, how are your levels? You can be right in front of them and say, yeah, how's that level? And if the levels aren't great, then you can just pull up the mixer, go to your sends and be like, ooh, let's turn down the headphone part for that one. Say everything on for one mix is going out bus 1, and I can go down all of my channels and just adjust the bus 1 send level right in front of them. And I can see, here, let me see the headphones for a second and listen to what you're hearing, and then give it back and make adjustments, and then you walk to the next person or whatever. And so that, I think, is like a huge tool. Now, you don't have to just do this with the iPad, and I've got this on my phone right here. I don't have my phone connected to screen share with this. So I'll just hold to the camera for a second. There's the app for the phone. It doesn't do everything, but it does a lot of stuff. So you can't quite do all the stuff that you can do with the iPad version. You turn it sideways and get a keyboard, and you can change the view. You can do step sequencer, live loops, key commands, chord strips. So you can do some stuff with that. I think, let me see, the other really probably useful thing here, I'm going to channel EQ for a second, open plugin. A couple of these do have the graphical thing. I was just thinking about this a second ago. And this is one of them that I find probably the most useful, because you can come in and do some EQ stuff. And that makes it really useful. I'm going to pinch up and down to make the Q band narrower, and then I can boost and cut and just slide that all around. And I think we have an analyzer right on the iPad. So it's nice having the analyzer on the iPad as well. So we could do this with all of them, right? We should be able to. That's the thing that I think that a lot of us are wishing it'd be a little bit more useful in some ways. But it's like, I go into Compressor, and let's open up that. So, this is nice, right? I can choose what circuit it is. I can go through and change all my settings. But one of the most important things I'm missing is an actual needle showing me how much is being reduced. And of course, I can listen and hear that, and I think everyone should listen for their compression, not just rely on meters. But every once in a while, when I'm doing a lot of different things, it's really nice. And I will say, right there below the mute solo automation buttons, that does have a little gain reduction meter on each of those channel strips. So that is the one place that you can actually do that. And then, of course, the other thing, let's choose a plugin here. We're going to go to audio units, and let's do something with Eventide Crystals, right? Sure. I mean, there's gotta be a way. So this is what this one looks like as an interface. Ooh, I don't actually, there's a bug here because it's like I've got this on the channel, but I don't have it down here in my mixer. Wow, so we have a bug. And you can see I've got channel EQ and I've got compressor. And then I have a third one that's right below that called crystals. And it's not showing up on the app. So yay for buggy software. That's pretty cool. So we found a bug. I should probably, report that one, but we'll see if I'm remembering the next moment that it's happening. So I see some comments coming in. Let's actually look at those. Jan Hunter Jr., man, been following your videos for all of the Logic Pro updates. Good to see you live. Good to see you live. I don't usually do this time of night, so I'm expecting some different people. I usually do in the middle of the day. And then Christo Rapolo says, well, what do you know? Yippee, the conversation has been coming for a while. Hee hee. And then hell yes, way worth it. Compose daily on my iPad Pro, mixing, mastering, everything on it. Mobile deserves the same love too. I agree. So, like I said, one of the next videos I'm working on is a comparison of Logic Pro versus GarageBand. I don't think a lot of people take GarageBand too seriously, and the truth is they should, because we've seen over and over and over again that's like the first place that gets developed, and then they put the features that seem to work well into Logic. And so you bet we should be paying attention, and not just paying attention, but dang, that thing can do a lot. I mean, it can do, there's a lot of power in the iPad format now, and it can do more in terms of music production than I would say most people need, if that makes sense. Now, it can't do everything. There's so many things that it cannot do. But that's what the video I'm working on is going to be about, because I do think that there's a conversation. And there's something about the immediacy. So I hear every once in a while someone say, oh, I love Logic. It's really easy to use and straightforward. And I'm like, dude, what are you smoking? I mean, that's not. Logic is not easy to use. It's not. I mean, I feel like I've mastered it, but I've never once confused like knowing Logic and thinking it's easy to use as being one and the same. And I know that because I teach Logic. I've got a group of 26 students at the university. We meet twice a week. I do one-on-one lessons with Logic. I do training with Logic. I make videos all the time about Logic. There's nothing like that's easy to use about Logic or any of the workstations. If you're brand new to this has got to be such a confusing world. Why do we have like circles that do panning from left to right? I mean, why do we have circles that do panning from left to right? Think about it. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Why do we have buses and auxiliary tracks and stereo out and a master track? What does all this stuff mean? It's insane. So for somebody who wants the accessibility and actually use an intuitive platform, then something like GarageBand is incredible, because it funnels all of your stuff into certain places. And then you can open that, like you can say, okay, I've hit my creative peak with this project. I'm going to give it to somebody who's now like a Logic engineer. And you can just give them the GarageBand folder, and it opens up in Logic and everything's there. And you can expand it with all of the Logic tools. So I think that there's a lot to be said for workflow and, the form of what we do in our process, as opposed to having every single tool under the sun. F News says, iPad GarageBand need full automation that transfers to Logic. You're right. So there are some things that that aren't perfect, but we certainly are on the right track. And then Christo says, if you choose the right apps to use in GarageBand. It can be extremely powerful. Most likely the mobile version of Logic will be a hybrid of both. I think so. And I think what's going to happen is you're going to start having, and this is my prediction for April. My prediction is that with Final Cut Pro and iMovie, that the two of them are going to be like different sides of the disk. It's like they're going to be attached. They're going to be compatible. You're going to be able to use universal control between the two of them. And by the way, universal control, I've got it actually running right this moment. So my mouse, if you can kind of see my mouse, I'm putting it over by my face a little bit. I'm going to just pull this thing straight down. Oh, maybe it's not turned on. Oh, I put it in the middle of my screen, I think. I stand corrected. Let me figure out where it is. Because it should be on right now. Oh, it's off to the left. Let's move that down below my screen. It makes more sense when it's sitting down below my screen. So my mouse, it's up using the EQ on my actual Logic, which is behind where you can't see it. I'm going to pull that straight down. And now you can see the circle on my iPad. And I'm actually using my mouse to control the Logic remote app, which is then controlling my computer. I mean, this is like some serious Matrix stuff, man. We're definitely in. I just bypassed a plugin using my mouse on my iPad that's controlling my computer. And I pull my mouse right back up and continue working. So the universal control stuff is incredible and it's smooth. And so far, it has just worked, which is more than I can ever expect from any new release of anything, especially Apple doing it. Another comment from Luke. I just learned that GarageBand can use AU plugins like Waves. Amazing. Yeah, so that's the other thing I'm hoping for in the near future is that the AU plugins between the two platforms, they're AU version 3, AU v3. I wish that the ones I have on my iPad had the exact same version on my computer and that I could just use them interchangeably on projects. And then if I had one in GarageBand, I opened it up in Logic, that it would just work. That is currently not the case. There's always special versions for the iPad and iOS. And then there's full versions for the computer. Let's hope that they, at some point, put their foot down and say, you know what, if you're going to release one of these for the computer, let our customers use them in both places and just have that be working. And inter-app audio too. I don't actually use inter-app. Are you talking about inter-app audio or are you talking about something else, Christo? And man, you like the alien emoji, don't you? Well, I'll wait to hear what you have to say. But, I mean, I'm going to flip out of this for 1 second. I've talked about the IDAM before, the inter-device audio and MIDI. But you can see all of my, I don't have them organized in folders right now because I just re-downloaded a bunch of them and I need to organize. But there's some amazing apps on here that I don't get sounds like them in any other place. Nave is one of them, this advanced wavetable synthesizer. I love this thing, and it's incredible. This thing is a beast. And you could use it with some of the apps. And, let's see. What else? I mean, obviously some of the synth recreations are in all the different places. KQ Dixie is my favorite DX7 replica. I mean, it's a pretty good replica. It's if you can load in the original DX7 cartridges and get the exact sounds that were used on, like, half of Michael Jackson's songs, including Ironically, Michael Jackson used the DX7 for bass lines on a few of his tracks. So did Rick Aston. If you get Rickrolled, you're listening to a DX7 every single time. I don't know if you knew that, but it's pretty sweet. And then let's see, other creative tools and some of my games. I just downloaded this accordion instrument, which is one of the most realistic accordions I've ever heard. Yeah, we don't have sound from that right now. But this thing is an amazing thing. So there's a whole part of the iPad which people are still developing for. And it's interesting to see what people are coming out with, because certainly this is a tool that's really amazing. And I used to use this router on here because you can only really easily get out a stereo track. I used to use Aum right here as the way to do that. But I got to tell you, I've been converted over to a different one now. Let's see if I can figure out where it is. Ape Matrix. This thing is a router. And you can load up instruments and set MIDI back and forth. It's just, once you figure out the little bit of intensity with this thing, it's incredible. And I can load up all my different instruments on my iPad through this thing, route MIDI very carefully from my computer, and then add effects and process that part of it. And it all goes back into Logic. It's like we should do a video on this sometime. So this is the real deal, and Aum is definitely like, there haven't been a lot of things that do that, so I think they probably update it but don't innovate. Update but don't innovate, yeah. And I think this group is innovating like crazy, and a lot of stuff coming from them that's amazing. Suppo, let's see. Yeah, I'm reading comments. Eddie says iPad OS hasn't been given enough love. Very disappointing. Leaks from last year said that Ogic as well as Final Cut were coming to the iPad. Oh, Logic, yeah. Then Christo says several types of apps open. Christo says one of my favorites is Animo Z, which is cool. Incredible interface and synth engine. And then also says, I don't care for Aum. I agree. But Animog, cool. But it is cool. But I'm like a real traditionalist, and the Model 15 is my beast. This is modeled off of the original Moog Model 15, right? And so one of the things I found a number of years ago, the original Moog synthesizer, the first time that Bob Moog put all of these different little individual components together into one instrument and created, by many accounts, not by all, but by many accounts, one of the first synthesizers, electronic instruments ever. I was like, I wonder where that thing is. And I did some research and found out that the University of Michigan has it in their instrument collection. And it's Opus 1 is what they call it. And it's put into a wood frame that is made out of the pear tree in Bob Moog's backyard. And I said, you know what? I think that this is going to be something I want to go find. And so I got to know the curator at the University of Michigan Stearns musical instrument collection. He doesn't, there's a new one now, but one of the previous ones, he and I became great friends, and I got to go and spend a day with Opus 1 at their collection. Had to put on like white gloves to even use it, and just got to like make sounds, and I sampled it and recorded it, and it's an amazing instrument, and it's very similar by all accounts to this instrument that they have here, this one has some additional features, but by all accounts, it's very similar to the Model 15 and is the predecessor to that. So it's really cool. If any of you are near University of Michigan and have any sort of like legitimate, reason to go to request usage, there's always a chance. You can always ask. Oh, look, I reloaded. The Logic Control app in Crystals finally showed up. It wasn't showing up before. So yay for something working if you just ignore it long enough. Okay, I think I'm getting ready to probably wrap this up. Any questions about anything? I mean, this is part of the video. If you had any questions, I can take questions for about 5 minutes. And then I'm going to go upstairs and have a Propel water. Maybe a Girl Scout cookie that's sitting in the freezer. The good things in life. But if there's no questions, then we'll just pull the plug early on this. Let me ask this for anyone I know there's about 14 of you watching right now, or more. What videos are you most interested in seeing in the future? And Crystal says, do I think Logic will be here soon? Like I said before, I don't think Logic's coming directly to the iPad. I think GarageBand will expand and it'll work better with Logic, and they'll probably be better teammates. But Logic is too awkward to run on an iPad. There's too many screens and too many menus, and it's not like a friendly iPad OS tool. I don't even know if I'd want it on the iPad. What I want is to be able to work on my Logic projects on the iPad. And so maybe they're just going to come up with some sort of system to pull a Logic project and let you open it on here and do things. And then you take it back and then you have the full version of Logic. So that's probably something that's compatible with the Logic project at the core level, so you can do things and then just give it right back. Eddie says scoring for video. LZ2K7 made me look. Eddie says, had a friend that has a video he wanted to send me, clean it up, its audio and score it. So good workflow. There are some people who have made pretty in-depth videos on YouTube about some of that. I've done several feature-length films, the full score in Logic, and so I know like all of the ins and outs of that, and it certainly can handle it. It's better at that now than it's ever been. But I don't know if I'm going to make a video about that, because it's not like on my mind right this moment. But there are some great workflows, Eddie, for doing that. You can send through music XML from Final Cut directly into Logic and open that up, do all your work, and you can export it back into Final Cut. It's a pretty good workflow right now. We have a lot of cleaning up tools. And of course, we have tons of good scoring tools. Not as many good strings. So if you want like a great orchestral sound, you need to go third party. The studio strings in Logic are great for not much. They're great for not much. They're really cool in concept. They need some work when you want to actually make them sound realistic. Well, I think it is 9:56, and I told myself I'd be done by 10. So 1 or 2 more minutes. Crystal says, how about main stage for GarageBand and editing for the internal instruments like Alchemy? I actually think main stage video is overdue for my channel. I love main stage, and for a while, main stage was going to be the next big thing, but it kind of fizzled out, and they didn't keep on developing. They track all this stuff pretty closely. They know who's using it and how much it's getting used and for what, and they know that for GarageBand. And I think that at some point, people still use MainStage on a regular basis, but it's not like GarageBand, because they stopped putting all the new features in MainStage and they started putting all the new features in GarageBand. And so MainStage gets stuff almost later than Logic does now. But they're still testing a few things. The auto sampler that Apple acquired from Redmatica, an Italian company, like 12 years ago, that made it into MainStage first, and that was one of the last new things in MainStage that it ever got first. And now that's in Logic, and it's an amazing tool. But that came through MainStage the first time. And then the other stuff, of course, Alchemy. I make an Alchemy video every once in a while because I use Alchemy and I love Alchemy. But there are a couple people who've made like really in-depth series about Alchemy on YouTube. And once I saw what they had done, I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to I'm not going to beat that. And so every once in a while, when I learn something new about Alchemy that I think is cool, I make a video about it. Because every once in a while there's some esoteric stuff that kind of slips through the cracks on everybody, and it's cool. Well, we're counting down here. Thanks for everybody who jumped on board tonight. This is, like I've said this a few times, but March has been a month where I was going to do more live streams, and I certainly have done that. I'm going to be doing a couple more before the end of March. And then I start April. I'm going to be in Austria on a trip. And we'll probably be out of making videos for a week or two. And then back making some videos in the middle of April and into May. And then in June, I'll be taking a long time off. Because I'm taking 12 students to the Czech Republic and Prague to make music for 2 weeks in studios. And then I'll probably take the rest of June off because I'll be tired. And then in July, we'll be pumping out a lot more. So thanks, everybody, for watching. And have a good night or a good morning or wherever you are. But definitely go use Logic. Stop just talking about it and go make something. That's the only thing I ever tell people to do. But that's it. Thanks again. I'll talk to you all later.